the substance couldn't get me anywhere. I'm like thinking to myself, I either got to get better or I'm out. And then I went on to try to get my hands on something that would point me to the gospel. I really had no idea who Mormons were, what the Book of Mormon was. The first thing I opened it up to, and the first question I always had, I had in my mind, what do they believe happens when we die? I opened it up. There it is. Somebody had written in ink, this is what happens when we die.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Latter-day Believers. I'm Wilson. I'm going to be your host today. And today we are with another Texan, another one to add to the list. We're with James. How are you doing today, James?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Wilson?
I am doing great, man. Always happy to talk to other fellow member of the Lone Star State. But yeah, so we got James here today, and we're just going to kind of be getting a little bit of your story. Before we get into that, would you just be able to give us a brief introduction about who you are, like what do you like to do, just that sort of thing?
Yeah. So I was actually born in Southern California. I was born in Hollywood. Uh, my mother was a Scientologist. My father was agnostic, and so but they split up shortly after I was born. And so my brothers and I have two older brothers, and we lived with my mom, and we lived in it's called the Celebrity Center now. It's a big Scientology building right off of the 101 freeway in California. So we kind of lived there for a while. We lived in apartments there and everything. And so my mom kind of got us, she got us really kind of acquainted with it and everything like that. And, some of the tenets that they have was like, they believe that we are all spirit beings and everything of that sort. But they're not really founded on like any like gospel scriptures or anything of that sort. So we just kind of like, my mom would, play us tapes from the founder and everything like that. And so that was kind of our early kind of spiritual education a little bit. A lot of what they believe is progressing in like through different sessions and stuff like that. So and it was all right. I don't really have anything disparaging about it or anything like that, or towards any people or anything. So it's just kind of a casual thing that kind of got us introduced.
Yeah, for sure. I guess as you're kind of growing up in that, was there anything that kind of stuck out to you where it's like something maybe just sorry, I don't want to phrase this tactfully. I don't want to I want to be respectful.
No,
Um
absolutely. Well, I mean, there wasn't like there was no real like connection with the divine.
okay.
I'll say that.
Okay.
So there was secular that they had, which was like helping people learning, with learning and stuff. That's why you hear like, Tom Cruise would say like, yeah, they helped me out with this part. And then they had kind of more of the spiritual, and that was more of their teaching about like they believe heavily in like reincarnation and stuff like that, and like we've lived thousands of lives and that sort of thing. So that was all kind of interesting, but again, there was no real connection to the divine. And so like I would go out to school. I went to public school, and I had friends that were in other religions, or you just talked about God and different things. And so, I kind of knew that there was something a little bit more out
Mhm.
there. And I remember even my dad, when I would stay with him, he would tell me like, Sunday morning, I was looking for cartoons on the channel and flipping through the TV, and I'm like seeing nothing but preachers and everything like that. And my dad he's like, "Why are you getting so upset?" And I said, "Dad, God is everywhere, you know." and I just and it kind of began with realization. And then I remember my first prayer was after I got in a fight with my friend or something like that. And, you know, I went home and I just remember just praying on my own. And I was praying for my mom and praying for everything. And so that kind of got me started as far as like reaching out felt good because I felt comforted by it. And so I always grew up with kind of more of a canned prayer before I went to bed all the time. But it wasn't really like, it was just words in a way, just kind of hoping to connect, that kind of thing.
Yeah. That's actually I think that's really interesting just because, like, coming from a background that didn't really have any sort of established relationship with God, that you're kind of able to develop that on your own, I think is really fascinating. So, like, as you were growing up, is that something that you continued to look for?
It's sort of. Uh, Unfortunately, when I turned about 16, is that magical age where, you know, uh, my spiritual low was down. I
Yeah,
did
yeah.
not have
I think
much.
we've all been there, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it just wasn't there. And I was like, oh goodness, I was just not connecting at all with the Lord at all. And I was just so distant. And then that's when the substance started kicking in, when I started looking for it in other things and hanging out with friends and just kind of like trying to live it up, and that kind of thing. And it just, that was good for about 2 years, that just kind of just was soothing. And then the point where things were kind of like starting to change for me because I was not in a good place. And when I used substance, I was, I was hurting, I think, other people around me.
Mhm.
And I wasn't very considerate. There wasn't anything I ever woke up to and said, wow, that was great. You know, so I could kind of see that that was not where I wanted to be. And then came April of 94, uh, a celebrity that I was very, very much connected to, like, was like, I admired this person a lot. And he'd taken his own life. And it, for some reason, it just really shocked me. It, it really saddened me deeply. And I was just kind of like taken back by it. And, you know, it kind of sent me, I don't know, it's hard to explain. You just go into this like kind of like this deep, very sad part of myself. And I was kind of sinking in a way. And I just remember like waking up sometimes. I'm like, it was hard getting out of bed some days. You just not feeling the drive. And the substance couldn't get me anywhere. And so I then began to kind of like, I'm like thinking to myself, I either got to get better or I'm out, you know.
Mhm.
And it all came to a head one night, and just remember looking at myself in the mirror and saying, I got to do something. And I just remember falling on my knees in my room, just praying and sobbing, and just like, Lord, what am I doing? I need help here. I need some guidance here. And so I went to sleep, and then I went on to kind of went on a spiritual journey, so to speak. I woke up the next morning just trying to get my hands on something that would point me to the gospel, a gospel. Um, I knew three things before that I knew there were like three truths that I knew before going in. And that was, I believe that God the Father, Jesus Christ, and Holy Spirit were three separate beings. that the church would not tolerate drugs or alcohol, and that it would be a missionary church. So I definitely knew that I need to go in with that perspective. So my first venture, I actually went through my brother's drawers, and he used to have a buddy of his that was a weightlifter, and that person was like a Jehovah's Witness, and they'd work out together. And so he had given him he had given my brother this book. And I just kind of remember flipping through it, and I'm like, okay, yeah, God and Jesus, the Bible, these all look all right to me. And I was, trying to think like, okay, well, maybe this is a possibility. And then I came across a doctrine concerning their view of death. So it came straight out of their book. It wasn't like somebody else was telling it to me. And so that caused me to kind of go, they didn't believe in like when you died, you left, or you went to a spirit realm, that you just kind of just laid in the tomb. And that didn't set well with me at all. Mm-hmm. And so I closed that book. And then I began to kind of call around different churches and stuff like that. And I'm like, what do you guys believe in? And couldn't really tell me over the phone. This is days before the internet. And finally, I would ask other friends, and I got to a friend of mine at work. I said, what church do you go to? She said, I'm Mormon. I said, okay, that's great. You guys believe in God? Yeah. Jesus, of course. Holy Spirit? Yeah, definitely. And I said, that's great. What more can you tell me about it? And, she tried to help me out as much as she could. And I finally got to, I'm like asking all these questions. She goes, do you want to talk to missionaries? I said, no, I'm not really wanting to do that right now. But if you have something I could read, I'll take that. So she said, yeah, I definitely do. Let me get you a copy of the Book of Mormon. Okay. So I really had no idea who Mormons were, what the Book of Mormon was. I remember seeing an ad for the Book of Mormon one point. And but I just never really put the two together. And then finally she starts to come to work, and I'm asking her, hey, where's that book you got? And she goes, oh, forgotten. And I said, okay.
Come on, man.
And then second time, oh, I forgot it again. Third time, oh no. She kept forgetting it. But you know what? It really just got me more excited.
Okay. So it had you on the edge a little bit. Yeah. Okay. I got you.
Yes. So I was definitely like, it was getting me more excited about it,
Mm-hmm.
And then finally she shows up. She goes, I got it for you. I said, great.
There it is.
Yeah. And so I took it. It was a seminary copy. It was like a blue, it's the traditional handout one. Mm-hmm. And I went to it, and I got a hold of it, and the first thing I opened it up to, and the first question I always had I had in my mind was, what do they believe happens when we die? I open it up. There it is. Somebody had written in ink on the top of the page, this is what happens when we die. And it was an Alma 40. And I was like, spirit. It mentioned spirit here and here and here. I said, we're off to a good start. That's great. So, yeah.
So as you're studying the Book of Mormon and you were reading specifically in Alma 40, right? You're like, okay, so spirit, right? It started to resonate with you. Did this make you curious about learning about the plan of salvation?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah. I mean, I could see a difference in my day. I got up and I would just read from the Book of Mormon.
Wow. Okay.
Just clear as anything. I spoke of Christ, God, plan of salvation. I was just kind of just soaking it in as it were. So I was just kind of just reading through it every day, and I noticed my day feeling better. And I felt more like, okay, this is good. I'm on a good track here. And then I asked my friend, I said, do you guys have services? You have churches around? She's like, yeah, of course. So she invited me out to her family ward. And this was the first time I'd ever stepped in a church building ever.
Really, just like general all churches, like any church.
Yeah, pretty
Wow.
much. I mean, I only remember my sister's baptism, like when
Mhm.
she was baptized Catholic. But other than that, not really much experience in
Wow.
being in a church at all. Yeah. So I, I remember getting dressed and thinking, oh no, what if it's a very loud kind of experience, and with the preacher is very loud, and he pounds the pulpit and he screams and yells at the people, or something. He's just very charismatic, and
Mhm.
he's going to spot me, and he's going to make me confess
Yeah,
a
gotta call me out. Yeah, call me to
yeah,
repentance.
yeah.
Yeah, I gotcha. Well, because I'm sure. Well, sorry, if your experience is with like preachers on TV, right? That is very much so. Like, I mean, religious television is a lot of that, right? Like stomping, calling people out, calling people to repentance. So I can understand why going with that notion.
Oh yeah, yeah. So that was a concern of mine, and we got there, and I quietly sat in the back, and the first speaker is like this 11-year-old kid, and I'm like, wow, this is great. He's talking about just scouting. It's really chill. And then then came up the adult speaker and everything, and that was it just everything was just so very calm, and it was very nice. I'm like, yeah, this is a good experience. And I went over and talked to the bishop and everything, and so they were just very welcoming and very nice. And then I didn't and then they said, well, you want to try the singles ward, because I was 18 years old at the time. So they said, maybe you want to go with the students. And I said, sure. So that that began. I was just kind of just going to first hour, and it was very easy to sneak in a way without being so detected. I just kind of wanted to just observe and just fly under the radar and just kind of see what it was like. The first meeting I remember being at was a testimony meeting, and people getting up and they were sharing different things about their testimonies, and they were talking about Forrest Gump and stuff like that. So
You
cracking
gotta love a good testimony meeting, man. You gotta love a good one.
yeah. And it was just so funny. And so, I was feeling the spirit more and more. And then, somebody came up to me and they said, are you, do you want to take missionary lessons? And I said, no, I'm just going to still kind of fly a little low. And finally, January of 95 rolls around, and I say, okay, I know that there's a level of commitment I have to make here. And I don't want to sit on the fence. I don't want to be an observer anymore. So I actually walked up to my bishop and I said, hey, Bishop, I've been here about 4 months. What do I need to do next? He says, you're not baptized? And I said, no, I'm not. And he goes, oh, he thought that I was just another BYU student who came through and in and out or whatever.
Mhm.
So he introduced me to the missionaries, and I kind of began the lessons from there.
Okay. So, like, as you were taking the lessons, was there anything that, like, really stuck out to you?
Yeah, so like the first lesson, of course, they talked about, of course, Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ. I'm like, good.
You're like, "Yep. Check." Like, that's what I was looking for, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then came the first vision, Joseph Smith. I remember them asking me, they're like, do you believe that this could happen? And I said, sure, but it didn't really like dawn on me that much. And then finally, like, they're like, well, we would like you to go pray about it. And I said, sure. that evening I did pray about it. And the answer that came to me wasn't like the lightning feel, sort of. It was more like, well, continue to learn. And if there's something you find doesn't jive, then you go, okay. But it just kind of felt calm and good. And then I continued learning. They wanted me to, the second discussion, they usually have you set a date for baptism. I said I wasn't there. I still wanted to get some more answers. And, I was definitely on board with word of wisdom, law of chastity, everything like that. And I was really happy to find like the plan of salvation was, the degrees of glory and everything like that. That was all fantastic to me. I thought, I was like, this is really good. And they finally did. They're like, do you want to be baptized? I said, yeah, let's do this. And so we set uh April of 95. I was baptized. And my I invited my father, my stepmother, and my sister were there. Um and they asked me when I got out of the water, they're like, well, how do you feel? And I said, better. I feel better.
There you go. It's a great way to put it.
Yeah, I did. I was feeling a lot better. And I remember the next morning I woke up and I'm like, it honestly, it felt like Christmas. It felt like a Christmas morning. It felt honestly like the day was a gift instead of uh, a treasury for me.
Mhm.
So,
I really love that. Just 'cause I feel like there's just like an inherent hope that comes with someone who lives the gospel, right? We have hope for a better world, hope for good things to come. And I don't know, I just love that tidbit. So you were baptized, right? This and are you still in Southern California at this time?
yes. Uh-huh. Yeah. Still in Southern California. I'm at the singles board the whole time. Um, just taking up a calling. I was a Sacrament Coordinator. So that got me to meet a lot of people. My now wife tells me that I was the reason why she showed up to church early. was this
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So there's a little extra going on the YSA ward. All right.
Yes. Yeah. And she did not tell me until after we were like, married, like, you know. So anyway,
That's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, it was great. It was great.
So you're baptized, right? You're starting to like find your place in a new ward. There's a girl there, right? I guess where did your life go from being baptized then?
I was asked like a year later, they're like, Have you ever thought of a mission?" And I always thought like, ah, you know, like I would be the guy to like, say something awful,
Like, oh, all of
missionary.
a sudden I'm the reason why someone's not baptized. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I thought I
Uh-huh.
was that guy,
Hmm.
you dropped the ball, attitude. So, I just didn't really have much confidence in myself, and I didn't really like feel like I knew enough. But I always knew it's like I want another test. I want to strengthen my testimony. How am I going to do this mission? And then I was like, what does Heavenly Father want? You know, He wants His children to want to come back to Him. Mission. You know, a lot of things in life just were kind of on hold. It felt like I wasn't really like going too many places, and so I said, I finally said, yeah, I'll do it. And I filled out the papers and would have interviews with stake presidents and stuff like that. And, they just want to make sure, hey, you doing okay and everything. I'm like, yeah. And, and I would say to anybody if you're considering a mission, one of the great things to do as far as like getting your feet wet is going on splits with the elders. That was so great. I had such a great time with those guys. And I could be a fly on the wall, And I didn't have to worry about, oh, am I going to mess up somebody's testimony? It was just observing it and just, embracing what, what they were doing and everything. And, I told my dad before that, I'd be gone for a couple years. I think I told him at the wrong time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So,
Oh.
um, I think when I put in my papers was when opposition started getting real. One day my brother comes to pick me up from work and he's driving me home and he's like, hey, did you tell dad how long this mission thing was for? And I said, yeah, I told him it was 2 years. And he goes, okay, dad thinks it's like 3 months, like a summer camp
Oh.
thing. And I'm like,
Oh,
oh,
so that's it's a little bit different.
yeah, exactly. And I'm just like, oh no. So because my brother worked with somebody who had served a mission. And so he knew the duration and he's like, you better tell dad. I said, okay. And so we pull up and that's like the longest driveway walk I ever had.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just like, all right, here it comes. And I opened the door and my dad's right there, right in front of me eating dinner. And he goes, you tell me how long that mission thing is for again. And I said, 2 years, Dad. He goes, 2 years? You're not going. And I was just like, okay. And I just was calm. I was still calm. I didn't want to say, I didn't want to make things worse. So I just kind of just calmly walked over to him. I told him, I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be taken care of. Things are going to be fine. I know I'm going to be fine right after my mission and everything. It's going to be okay. At that point, I was actually prepared to not come home after my mission.
Wow.
Yeah. So if it meant that, then okay, you know. And actually having that dedication was what turned my dad around in 5 minutes. He was just like, you know what? You have my blessing. You can go. And I was like, what was the turnaround point for you? And he said, because not once in what you telling me involved what I had to do for you on that spectrum. You weren't asking like anything out of me, really. This is you. This is your dedication. I'm not going to take that from you, you know? And so he said, you can go. I said, awesome. Awesome. From there, I just kind of I was just thinking everything was going to be sweet rolling after that. Got my dad out of the way. And then kind of came some friends that were showing up and they're like, hey, I noticed you're going off to go preach a mission. Can I tell you a little bit of something? They try to serve a little anti
Okay.
with me or something.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And to me, it's just kind of and it just didn't really want to deal with it. You know,
Mhm.
um, it just felt kind of odd to me that people that when I was in the thralls of the, acting crazy, nobody was really preaching anything to me. But then now all of a sudden I'm baptized and I'm living right. Now all of a sudden you want to tell me that, I need to, you know, think about my choices,
Mhm.
concerning my spiritual growth and everything. I'm like, no. And I just remember waking up sometimes in the middle of the night, just terrified, out of my mind. You're looking at the guy who's watched every scary movie as a child out there. I watched every scary movie.
Mhm.
This was something I was different, and it just felt so horrible. I just remember just feeling so horrible. And I go and I turn on the light and I sleep with my scriptures on my chest and just praying. This happened a couple of times, and I finally went to the elders and I said, guys, what's going on? And they're like, when you put in your papers, you are a target. You are top target. I'm like, oh, okay. So, eventually it subsided, thankfully. And I got my papers, I got my mission call, and I was just there ripping it open, and I'm like, and there it said, "You've been called to serve St. Louis, Missouri mission." So awesome. And I was actually to report in December of '96, and I did. I invited my dad to my farewell. My dad, my stepmom showed up.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome because I remember after I was done, I had not seen my dad cry on many occasions, but that was one. Yeah, I didn't even realize it. I looked over and he was crying after it, and it was great. The great thing about going out to St. Louis as well was they had they're getting ready for the 50th temple was going to be the St. Louis, Missouri
With
temple.
St. Louis, I didn't know that.
Yes. So I went in while the mission was hot. Members were excited to share it with people. Everything. It was just really nice. It was a really nice experience. Like I said, it was fantastic. Um, even with all the rejections and everything, it was still just awesome. In fact, one of my testimony building experiences was teaching a family, and I remember me and an elder. I got to present the first vision, and it was the husband and the wife. They were there, and I remember after I was done, the husband leaned closer to me, biggest grin on his face. Right? He goes, "Can you read that again, please?" And I said, "Absolutely." And I read it again. His grin got even wider. I mean, he was beaming, and his wife was like, "I don't know why, but I just feel like bawling my eyes out right now." So the spirit was very much felt, and that helped me kind of confirm more and more about the restoration of the gospel, and kind of helped to sync that with me a little bit more.
That's something that's so beautiful about missions and just about teaching the gospel in general is that, of course, right, you're teaching someone else and helping them gain a testimony, but at the same time, it's strengthening yours, right? It's like the best win-win of all time is that beautiful paradox, right? So I love that experience. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really great, and I was glad to have you know seen been there for the dedication, everything, and you know it was great. I was there when President Faust had actually dedicated the temple, and fantastic being in that room with him when he did that. When he did the dedication is great.
That is awesome. Being in that room for the temple dedication, that's special. That's something that not everyone gets to experience. So that's awesome.
Yeah,
So as you progress through your mission, and you came home, and of course everyone kind of hits a bit of that. I don't know how to phrase this, but like everyone kind of gets to that point in their life, right? Whenever you're home from your mission, right? You were just on fire, and then you have the rest of your life ahead of you, and you're like, oh shoot, like what do I do now, right? How'd you kind of
yeah,
tackle that?
yeah. So, well, the first part of my life was waiting for me at the airport. There she was, and
Oh, okay,
yes, so
okay. There she was. Like I gotcha,
yeah.
I gotcha.
So she had been writing me when I was out, and so she was right there, and so we began dating and everything like that. So that part of my life, I was very happy, and you know, and everything, and so the other parts eventually came around as far as like college, but I kept with institute. and of course, couples classes and stuff like that. And the temple, the temple was really, man, I would say, I had it in my heart. I'm like, because back when I was on my mission, you can go to the temple one time a year, and or if you had a family that you taught.
Really, you could go with them.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So I was very much wanting to get in, get back to the temple. I was living in Riverside,
Mhm.
and so getting from Riverside area to Los Angeles, quite a haul. So, but I made the trip. And if I could share, is like I had so many fantastic experiences being there. One of which was I actually um, I did proxy work for somebody, uh, but I felt like I wasn't really present. I didn't feel like I did it right, and it just kind of just lingered in the back of my head, and I was like, oh, I really feel like this person's work needs to be done again. And I went home and I wrote down the guy's information, and I just slept on it. The next morning, I kind of felt like, okay, I need to this needs to be done again. So
Mhm.
when I got back home from work, I called the LA temple, and I said, and I gave the information to the person. I said, I was there last night. Can you guys make sure that this work gets his work gets redone? And he said, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, we'll do that. Time goes on, a few months goes by, and I'm taking a trip back to the temple. Friday night, Los Angeles, you can imagine, very busy.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Oh my goodness. Buses were coming in, loads of people. Okay. And, I'm walking in, I'm in the locker room and got dressed. We're all standing in this very long line, and people are coming in and out. And there's a temple worker at the end, and he's like, who wants to name? Who wants a name? And it gets to me, gives me a name. It's the exact same guy.
Really.
Blew me away. There's no reservations that we had there. We don't, I didn't really have the reserve. It was just out of the clear blue. I recognized the name, date, everything. I was like, okay, I'm going to do it right this time. I'll get it right. And I did. And, there just been so many miracles with that. And just been such a blessing.
Wow. James, that is really, really special. Thank you so much for coming on the show today and for sharing your experiences and your testimony. Personally, for me, I don't know, it resonated with me. I felt the spirit, and I'm sure that anyone listening today felt that too. So thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Appreciate you. Thanks.
And thanks to you guys too for tuning into the show today. Please feel free to check out this next video that's on the screen right here. Another great story they have for you. And be sure to check out the playlist of stories that we have down in the description below. But that's all that we have for you guys today. We'll see you next time.